There's always a way of looking at it, isn't there? And God can supply, and He can use whatever means He needs to get them here. Now, not in reference to that He's going to use the devil to pay that debt off. But if He wanted to, that's okay with me, right? But the reality is He wants to use His people and His people of faith. We can learn a lot of things through this miracle. And I think there's some things that absolutely, that helps us not only in what we're trying to accomplish today, but will help you throughout your life of walking by faith. Because the first thing you got to know is that if you trust God with everything, the first thing you trust Him with is with your life. That's it. You've got to trust Him with your life. Because let me tell you, when I try to figure things out and when I try to do what is right, the Bible tells me that there's a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof is death and destruction. If I think some way I can get to heaven simply by doing the right things, I've made a mistake. I've made a mistake. Getting to heaven and having a relationship with God is a faith issue, folks. It's trusting Him. Matter of fact, there's a little acrostic for faith. If you take those words, it says, forsaking all, I trust Him. That's it, isn't it? That I place my life in His hands. Now the problem is some of us have a lot of trouble keeping our hands off of our lives and not allowing God to continue to do what He wants to do with our lives. But by faith, if we do that, then folks, we can know not only the full and meaningful of life today. Matter of fact, the Bible teaches us that God says to us that He wants to give us life. And He wants to give us a full and abundant life. And He wants to do it right now. Now, full and abundant life doesn't necessarily mean all the things of this world. What it does mean is a peace and a joy in your heart that you know that whatever the real needs of your life are, that God is able, capable, and willing to supply and to use you to bring glory to Himself. That's what He wants to do. But what do we need to learn through this miracle? First of all, we've got to learn that we trust God. But I think there are three things that sometimes we have difficulty with that we really need to learn. First of all, some of you have already said, I don't have anything, or what I have God doesn't need, or God can't use. Listen, if He used a small boy's lunch, the first thing He wants us to remind us is don't think that what you have is insignificant or cannot be used for the glory of God. When you do this, this is God's way of hiding what your blessing. Remember the title of the message this morning is what difference have your blessings made? See, God doesn't just bless us with things in order for us to be blessed. God blesses us so that we can be what? A blessing. Clearly. He does that. That's His way. That's His economy. That is His solution to the economy. You know, we've talked a lot about the economy, and everybody thinks that something is going to happen or this person can make a dramatic effect. Do you really want to see our economy be to bring power? You turn those things over to God. Let God be in control of it. Let me tell you what, some of these things are going to straighten themselves out then, won't they? They will. But everybody tries to do it their way. But oftentimes folks think, well, listen, what I have or who I am is so insignificant. If we don't learn anything else, for a small boy's lunch in a crowd of 20,000, it would only take the faith of a small boy to walk up with a sack lunch and say, listen, this is what I got. Let's see if we can feed these folks. Think about that. Man, that was faith, wasn't it? That was faith. Do you think that little boy thought it would feed all those folks? I mean, listen, if you were trying to feed 20,000 people with that, nobody would even smell like sardines when it was over. Wouldn't happen. But oh, what a miraculous thing He did. So we can't imagine that what we are, what we have, is insignificant for God. Let me tell you something. I learned a principle a long time ago. God doesn't make any junk. And therefore you have value in the eyes of God. So valuable that His Son came and died for you. And God can use you to bring glory to Himself. The second part of that is almost parallel, but has a little different emphasis to it. Never think that you are too young or too old for God to use you. Oh, I hear this so many times. Well, I've had my day, or I'm too young, and I don't know enough. Let me tell you why. There's not a creature that God created that God didn't know and had a purpose for your life. His first purpose for your life was to bring glory to Him. Second purpose for His life was to love Him. We need to do that. I love what John says to us in the 14th chapter of the Gospel of John. In that little passage of Scripture, we talked about that. We're going to talk about it on Wednesday night. But simply, in that wonderful passage, after God said, don't let your hearts be troubled. If you believe in God, believe also in me, for in my Father's house are many mansions. When He goes down and we talk about that. But then if you get in the latter verses, He even tells us that if we ask anything in His name, that He will do it. Now, that is not a panaceic ideology. It only becomes that when we place ourselves by faith in His name and we're consistent with what He wants to do. But then there is another little verse that ends that particular section when Jesus says to His disciples, one-on-one, and to all of us, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. If you love me, you'll follow me. Our lack of commitment to God, our understanding of excuse making, of whether we're too young, too old, or have too little, is simply a lack of faith and obedience to God. We must place all that we are in the hands of God. There is no other way. Because when I'm in control of my life, usually things aren't going very well. But when God is in control, I watch His hand work, and He does things, and I step back and I think, wow, I didn't think about that. Well, no wonder. Have you ever done that? I never saw that coming. Why? Because God's work, and my job is not to figure out how to do it. My job is to walk by faith with Him. And when we do that, it's miraculous what God does. I love what Henry Blackaby simply says about that, and experiencing God, knowing and doing the will of God. He says God is always at work around us. And what our purpose is to watch what God's doing and get right in the middle of it. Right in the middle of it. So never think that we're too old or too young to follow and to walk with God. We're not. We're not. And never say, I have nothing to offer God. That's almost redundant for the first one, but so often people just give up hope. Now, do you really think that Jesus expected the boy to have enough to feed 5,000? No. He knew that lunch wasn't going to feed 5,000 by itself. But after he got through with it, it did miraculous things. What was the key? He placed it in the hands of Jesus. So, if he didn't expect the boy's lunch to feed 5,000, what did he expect that day? What did Jesus expect? I'll tell you what he expected. You figured I would, didn't you? He expected the boy to have enough faith to place it in Jesus' hands and leave the rest up to the Lord. That's what he expected. And that's what he expects of us. Steve may have been the same way. When we were young, we thought we were going to change the world, and all of us did. As we've grown older, we know if the world's going to be changed, it's going to be changed by faith in Jesus. And He's going to do the world changing. He is. He molds us. He makes us after His will. We can't give up hope. And even though we know that God doesn't expect us to carry all the load, He expects us to give all of us, ourselves, to Him.